Well, we're coming out of that process. The report is out. Justice Ngcobo saying the process tested the participants and their families to the limits. There's 3 volumes. The first one is the actual report itself. Volume 2 and 3 are records of every single document on which they relied on to make this report. He says there's also an electronic version. And the speaker there saying that with the handing over of the report, the panel comes to an end. The House will consider its contents and determine if further action is required. There you have it there, that report delivered by Justice Sandile Ngcobo, former Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court of South Africa, Judge Thokozile Masipa, former Judge of the Gauteng Division of the High Court of South Africa, and Advocate Mapisa-Nqakula. Let's bring into our conversation now Ritumedzi Benedict Phiri, MD at the Les Prudentia Specialist Council there. Mr. Phiri, thank you so much for making the time to speak to us this morning. Retired Chief Justice Ngcobo saying it was important to stay within the prescripts of the law as they were unfolding this process in this test of Section 89 that Parliament is testing for the first time. Are you satisfied with just this initial delivery of the report, that processes were followed up to the T?
Well, I think what he was alluding to was that obviously it's the...
Please unmute yourself, Mr. Phiri.
Apologies for that. And just to say what I was saying, I think the former Chief Justice there, just alluding to the fact that the test, that is required to satisfy whether there's serious misconduct on the part of the president or a serious violation of the Constitution or the law, is circumscribed in the rules of that Section 89 committee. And it's actually quite a high bar when you look at it, because ultimately requires is that the president, his conduct has to be unlawful, or it has to be dishonest, or it has to be improper behavior in bad faith. And similarly, when you look at the violation of the Constitution or the law, the requirement of bad faith seems to be, where the boundaries of that test lie. And I think he was just giving a precursor to actually the test that is being put into play for the very first time is actually quite a high bar. And, the evidence that is actually put in is strictly from what they receive from the members of parliament, and they can't inquire further than that in terms of those rules.
Is there, though, something to be said about, I suppose, an argument for the separation of powers, Benedict? Good morning to you, where you do have a process that started during this year, where you had Arthur Fraser lay charges with law enforcement, and then the process that is taking place as we see it unfold this morning with the National Assembly. I mean, can you have those two processes running concurrently where law enforcement is doing its work? We hear Justice Ngcobo saying this morning that it was not within his purview to make recommendations for law enforcement. Can you have those two processes running concurrently?
Yes, I think you can have those two processes running concurrently, and I think it's absolutely correct that those two processes run concurrently, because there are various other bodies of state, as you say, for instance, the Hawks, who are investigating the allegations. There's also the public protector as well, who's looking at violations into the ethics code. And this process basically is the precursor to an impeachment process, and looks at sufficient evidence, which is a very different evidential inquiry to what, for instance, the Hawks will satisfy themselves of in recommending prosecution, or what the public protector will look at in coming to a decision whether there's been a violation of the ethics code. So I think there is scope and a very well-warranted reason for these processes to be able to run concurrently. I do think it leaves questions, though. If, for instance, you have the public protector process come out with a different finding, and this process come out with a different finding to that, I think it will leave questions as to whether this process has been sufficient, or whether the Section 89 rules are set at a bar that may not be actually the right bar to give effect to any conduct by the president that may not actually be, acceptable.
Benedict, our parliamentary reporter, Mercedes Percent, I don't know if you were listening to the question and answer session, asks a pertinent question just in terms of the significance of the parliamentary process, that whichever way it goes, it's not binding on Parliament. What is the significance of this process, therefore?
I think that, it does have a political significance in the sense that if this independent panel finds that there is sufficient evidence to indicate that the president, may have misconducted himself seriously or seriously violated the Constitution and the law. I think what we have come to see of previous court cases, insofar as, for instance, Jacob Zuma is concerned, is that there is a duty on Parliament to hold the president to account. So in as much as this process opens up a further committee process and then eventually the vote on impeachment, the fact of the matter is that the law requires Parliament in instances where, for instance, the finding here would be that the president is guilty of serious misconduct, for the Parliament to hold the president accountable in that situation. So it is significant if that's what the finding will be, because I don't think Parliament can sit on its hands any longer without holding the president to account if that is the outcome of this inquiry.
Piri is a legal analyst, specialist counsel at Luce Prudentia, and we're going to just keep you on hold for a bit as we bring in the president of the ATM, Vuyo Zungula. Mr. Zungula, thank you for making the time to speak to us this morning. You invoked Section 89.1 of the Constitution, and according to the Speaker just now, the report will not be handed to political parties, but will be released this evening and will only be tabled early December. Your response to this?
Greetings to yourself and everyone listening. Look, this is the rules and the processes of Parliament that dictate that the ATC, which is the tablings of the reports, that is a process in which the Speaker will follow. And as agreed to in the last programming committee, that this report must be considered by the House on the 6th of December, which is next Tuesday. And the Speaker, as she has said this morning, that on the issue of voting, we will have to make a determination whether the consideration of the report will be done by means of a secret ballot or the current method. It is our view that when the report is considered, the best way in which the voting should be done, it should be done via means of a secret ballot. That will give all members of Parliament that leeway to vote with their conscience and not worry about whatever their political parties might do if they decide to vote outside of the party mandate. In terms of what the report will say, we are very positive as a ATM that the grounds for misconduct are there. If you read Section 96 2A of the Constitution, which speaks about paid work, and the evidence, which is by the words of the president, where he says he indeed has taken part in paid work, you cannot dispute his own testimony, you cannot dispute his own admission. Therefore, not even looking at the issues of the unlawful instruction, the risk of a conflict of interest, the violation of the foreign exchange laws, just by the fact that the president has openly admitted in taking part in paid work, we're very confident that the report will say there is prima facie evidence for Parliament to further probe this matter via an impeachment process.
Indeed, as you say, the grounds for misconduct are there. Let's just look at the provision of Section 89 of the Constitution. It provides for the National Assembly to remove a president from office on the grounds of either a serious violation of the Constitution or the law, or serious misconduct or an inability to perform. Is this the ultimate, is this your end game?
Definitely. Look, the president has seriously violated the Constitution. The Constitution can't say, as a president, focus on being the president of the country, on resolving all of the issues, the problems of the country, and then the president is engaged in another income-generating activity. which is selling of the livestock, whereas him being as president, he's going to be paid up until he dies. He enjoys those benefits up until he dies, but the president decides to do another thing. Then on the issue of him being the head of state, which is the first citizen who's entrusted to defend and uphold the constitution, for him to give an unlawful instruction to a police general to investigate or deal with a matter of a theft or burglary on his private farm, and he uses his political office and his political power over his subordinate, which is General Rode, and gives him that unlawful instruction. And the fact that even Mr. Bejani Chauke, who's a presidential advisor, went to Namibia, and we know that advisors only act under the instruction or blessing of their political principles. Therefore, you can't have a president now that will want all South Africans to be law-abiding, to respect the law, whereas he's the chief violator of the law in relation to this Phala Phala scandal. And one thing that I raise, Sister Desiree, is that all of those people who were found, who were said to have stolen money in Phala Phala, there's none of them that is in prison now. All of them, they are not in prison simply because should there be a court case whereby they will be interrogated and it runs publicly, all of the misdemeanors and the violations of the law and everything that went wrong in Phala Phala would be laid out in the open. So it should raise questions as to the president confirmed that money was stolen, and General Rode said that he was given this particular instruction. However, those people are not in prison because nothing was done by the book when it comes to that particular investigation.
Mr. Ngcobo, we have other reactions waiting, so I'm going to have to let you go for now, but thank you so much for your time. Of course, we'll continue to speak to you as the process unfolds. Naledi?